with allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to start the meeting in chair temporarily until we elect a new slate of officers. But first of all, there's not much in the audience, but everybody at home hopefully is watching. I want to welcome Jim Labrie to the Select Board. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Liz Moulton for her 3 years of dedication to the board. I think she added an awful lot to the board and put in a lot of time and effort, so we very much appreciate that. So if you're watching, Liz, thank you very much. So now, next thing we have to do is elect a new slate for chair, vice chair, and secretary. So I need a motion from the floor for chair first. Okay, I'll step forward. I'll nominate Charlie Knickie as chair. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that's 4-0 vote. Vice chair? Need a nomination from the floor?
Martin?
Yes, second.
Discussion?
What's there to discuss?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we need a clerk. And that traditionally goes to the newest member of the select board, but if somebody wants to make a nomination? I nominate Mr. Labrie. Is there a second?
Second.
Would you like to discuss that? It's just traditional.
It's fine.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Just means you have to sign a bunch of documents and we'll funnel it down. So with that, I am going to relinquish the chair to Mr. Knickie. You want to come over here?
Yeah, and a lot of times I'm taking care of it. Well, thank you. Didn't expect to end up being chair. At least not this fast. Okay, so I guess the first thing we're going to do is start with the town administrator's report.
Hi.
Heather?
Thank you very much. So a couple things by subject here. We have project updates. On procurement, we had gone out to bid for the handrails. We had to do a request for solicitations because of the amount of the estimated cost of construction fell under Chapter 149. We've had 3 bids that were submitted yesterday by 11 a.m. We opened those publicly, and we're just going through them to make sure they comply with all the requests of everything that was submitted, and then to check references, and then hopefully we will be awarding the contract by the end of the week. Request for proposal for legal services was something that the board had talked about at the last meeting. In your packet and later on this evening, there's actually an item on there to discuss and review the request for proposals for legal services that we took from the town of Carlisle, because they did one a few years ago that seemed to be pretty easy to adjust. Request for solicitation, we are going to need to put together for the HVAC maintenance system for this building. We currently use SNE. The contract is up this year. The 3-year contract currently is about $6,000 to $7,000 annually. $7,000 times 3 years is $21,000. It puts us between the 10 and 25K mark for Chapter 149, which means we need to do a request for solicitations, post on Combis, post on the Central Register, the town's website, and the town clerk's board, which is also exciting. So I will spare you the details unless you wish to know more. Hopefully we'll get that done by the middle of this month. Safe routes to school. I talked to the gentleman who's going to be doing our appraisal and the company that will be doing the review appraisal today. He's in the process of contacting the 2 abutters. One is an individual and one is Cumberland Farms. He will set up the appraisal and review appraisal. He hopes to be complete no later than May 27th. So then that will move forward.
Does that appear that this is still on track for this summer?
I don't know. I spoke briefly with Karen Axel from Mass DOT, and she was very happy to hear that we actually had a predicted end date of May 27th. She didn't give any indication in her very brief email as to where that will put us on construction season. I can follow up. Hazard mitigation plan. I met today with the fire chief, Don Snyder, who is the emergency management director, Randall Kemp, who's the highway superintendent, and Catherine, unfortunately I can't remember her last name, she is a representative of PVPC. We're working on updating our hazard mitigation plan. These plans are good for about 5 years. They get sent to MEMA for approval and then to FEMA for approval. And if you get it in, you are then eligible for potential grant funds for the next 5 years of time. At this point, I think this was our second or third meeting on this project. We're going to have a few more, but I think we're making a great deal of progress. Once it gets set to MEMA and FEMA and they approve it, then it comes back to the Board of Selectmen to approve and adopt, is what I was told. You're giving me a look, Charlie.
I'm just curious if this also includes mapping of all the Tier 2 hazardous materials in the town.
All I can tell you in the hazard mitigation plan is we go through all the different possible scenarios of things that can happen. Flooding, what's the potential, what's the impact, what mode would we be in, how much of the town would be affected if it were to occur, would we be in crisis mode. We go through, thunderstorms, severe snowstorms,
all the environmental
tornadoes.
issues. I'm just thinking about the man-made issues of storage of chemicals and stuff. If that's
Well, they believe it all, some of the pieces in it with the task list come down to like stormwater drainage management. There wasn't, I think we only touched basically on the hazardous materials piece. We got more into the fire aspect and other potential things.
okay. That's fine. I'm just more curious than anything.
Personnel policy procedure rules, they are currently over at council for their review for the regulations and rules. Council's backed up right now because it's town meeting season. So they did assure me that they should have them back to me by mid-month. That will give the personnel policy procedure board sufficient time, hopefully, to advertise, notify all employees, and put a meeting in effect and get everything approved prior to the end of the fiscal year. So we can have a new policy, if that's the direction everyone wants to go, for July 1st. Net solar metering credit contract is currently with council still. They're reviewing, same issue as the other one, and they should have it back to us the day after town meeting, if not sooner, for in the event that the town votes to approve the article on the warrant, then we will be good to sign. Any questions on that? Okay. Collective bargaining agreements, where are we? Highway Department is ready to go. We just need to get the representative in to sign. The Police Department, we're in the process of just getting them over the MOA, Memorandum of Agreement, to see if they accept. If they do, we will be all done with that one and just need to update the final contract. And dispatch has already been completed. We just have to get a hold of a copy of the contract or retype it and get it signed. Budgeting, we had another budget meeting last night with FinCom and FinTeam. We finished the budget, it's balanced. We incorporated what the folks had requested. That's later on in the agenda, but there is a summary page of all the changes that we had made since last Wednesday. Tonight we'll also be going over the annual town meeting warrant, which is held on May 17th. All those documents are there, and that's on the agenda as well. Meetings. I have an emergency management meeting tomorrow. I think, Charlie, you got an email on that as well. I don't know if you're available. I think you said no.
What time?
It's at 11. So that is with the emergency management director, the fire chief, the police chief, I think, the highway superintendent, and the Board of Health. And we're just going over a couple things, including using potentially the dispatchers to disseminate messages on Code Red, and coming up with a policy on that. We need to discuss our SEMP plan a little bit and where that process is with MEMA and all of their changes. Also go over the hazard mitigation meeting that we had today, and there's a few other issues. We just haven't met in quite a while at this point. Department head meeting is on Thursday. I believe the moderator is holding his session on Thursday evening to go over the articles on the warrant. There is also on Thursday, I will be attending at PVPC for a joint meeting for Easthampton, Southampton for the Concom project. That is the Whittemore? Marla? The Whittemore Bridge project. On Monday, I have the MS4 permit meeting at PVPC with Randall, the highway superintendent. The state's changing the regs, and they've urged all DPW, highway super directors, and as well as town officials to attend so they get the information on their process. Next Wednesday is a Maya conference. Maya is the insurance company we use. It's a free conference, but they go over all the different claims and things. They also provide credit whenever you attend any of their events. This year we just got a voucher for $764 towards our insurance because of all the programs we've attended and certifications. And lastly, we have next Thursday, May 12th at, I want to say the first one is at 5:30, but I'm not sure, maybe it's 6, is the stretch code meeting, public information. And then after that is the Gwinner Property Cook and County Road public meeting in the same room, both televised. And other than that, the only other thing to add, annual town reports are still due. We have to get these done for town meeting, which means that town meeting's on the 17th. We have to send it to the printers by the 14th, which means we need it from anyone who's outstanding by the 9th or the 10th. In order to review and get it into, and that includes myself, because I am also behind on that as well, the select board's report, and we also have a few other boards, committees, and departments. Velda has sent emails to all of them advising that it has to be in. She will remind them again tomorrow, but if it's not in by, I think we said next Monday or Tuesday, we're going to end up putting a page in that says this department has not submitted a report for this year, because we're out of time. This includes myself. I'm just as guilty as everyone else. So, is there anything else for me?
No, guilt by association just doesn't do it for me.
On the report, do we need to put one togetger here, or are you
I
coordinating?
believe Charlie and Jackie are.
I believe
in
Jackie
cahoots on this one.
volunteered, and then Charlie got told to do it.
I was going to do it. I'm waiting for you, Charlie.
So the key here is Jim and I don't have to work on it.
Yeah, it looks that way.
Okay.
All right, I will this weekend spin something to you.
Good.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
All right,
If you need anything I can do, let me know.
okay. Are you done, Heather? Is that why you walked? Okay. I'm going to jump the agenda around because our building inspector's got hours right now, so I'd like to bring him right up front and center so he can explain to us what's going on with his department. I know, Tom, you're not accustomed to get up here, let's talk.
Thank you.
Thank you. How you doing, Tom? Good. How are you? Good, thank you.
How you doing? Good.
Just a little write-up to explain how things are going. At this point, we've done 82 permits since the first of the year. 2 signed permits. Gas and plumbing is at 49. Electrical at 32, with a total of 165 permits as of the 2nd.
Hey, Tom, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Of the building permits, how many are for new homes versus, the garages and the renovations? Only because we were looking at new growth last meeting, and it looks like it was projected about half of what we were at the same time last year. Is that consistent?
We had a little lull. It was not that it was slow, but it was permits coming in, say, about 3 weeks ago.
Right.
And the 3 weeks prior to that had slowed down a little bit. I think it's because of the warm weather this winter, because people kept on, going. We're going to be well over 100. I think it's 100, 120 permits more than the prior year, from July to July.
Okay.
So, but don't hold me to it. I want to say there's only been 3 or 4 since the first of the year.
Okay.
I don't know exactly.
It is slow.
Still wrapping up ones from last year,
Right.
but that were pulled. But since the first of the year, there's only 3 or 4 new ones, I believe.
Okay, thanks.
Actually should include that in there. That would be helpful for new homes. The revenue so far since the first of the year is over $21,000 for building. Plumbing and gas is $53.10, and electrical is $27.50, for a total of $29,530.93. We have our e-permitting up and running, and had a few glitches, bugs, and I guess always happens, but getting them under control, and it's going to be great. It's going to save a lot of postage. It's going to save a lot of time getting the homeowners, the contractors, their permits, and that, emailing them, just saving the postage alone. Never mind, they get it right away as soon as it's approved and accepted.
Are you getting any feedback from the people using it, or is not ready?
The email was one of the things that wasn't working, so we have that. That took a week or so, and now that the people that are getting that right away, yes, they're very happy.
Good.
And I actually can go out with the iPad and do an inspection and punch it, and a letter of completion will go right through email, right to them. So
You're
COs
finding it
especially.
easier? You're finding it much easier, too?
Yes. Yep.
Good.
Yes. When you're at the site, you can look it up, take pictures. It all goes right on there. I found myself calling Art just to confirm that I was somewhere, look it up on the computer, and now it's all right there. I mean, it's great. One thing Art and I were thinking of working on is we need to get a kiosk. So how we're going to do it, whether it'll be inside, actually talked to Heather a little bit about it. Inside the office, we have an old computer that I guess we can just wipe clean and set it up for people to do right in the town hall here. And it's whether we put it inside the office or somehow get it just outside the door. So it'd be open, whenever the town hall was open for people. And hopefully next year or so we can get electric, plumbing, and everybody, aboard on it. And I know that's a little ways away, but that would be.
Got to start somewhere, right?
Yes. But as far as the zoning, the town bylaws and that, I've met with Larry Smith, and we've been working with the planning board, CBA, and to work on that. I guess it's going to take a while, but we're moving forward on all that, which will make enforcing it much easier. And that pretty much
That's it.
wraps it up.
Any questions?
Just a comment. I got to say, since you've been here, things have progressed quite rapidly, so you're doing a great job. So just want to let you know that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, thank you. Good night.
Okay, the agenda is showing water commissioners basically sent us an email. You all have that report. You don't really wish me to read this into record, do you?
Well, it might be an update for the public, because they may not know, the water commissioners got a grant, some important stuff
All
that they may
right,
not.
that's fine, Heather. All right, this is the water commissioners report. Grant award, water department was awarded $47,000 to develop an assessment management plan for the water system. This ties into the next item, the water master plan update. The board has reviewed and commented on the preliminary findings of the master plan update. Top priority is identified is finding an additional permanent source of supply. DEP mandates we have two sources of supply. Both must be able to supply the maximum demand day independent of each other. Right now, we have the one well and a connection with Easthampton, which can only supply a portion of the towns due to hydraulics. The data developed with the AM grant will be rolled into the master plan to develop a detailed yearly capital plan for the next 5 years, and then forecast years 6 to 10 and 11 to 15. So basically, we're looking for a second source of water. Water rates. The board voted to modify the rate and fee structures effective FY17. A copy of the final report will be forwarded to the Board of Selectmen. Debt refinancing. We have discussed the options for refinancing our current debt to more favorable terms. A debt service plan will be developed after the master plan and assessment management plans are completed, working with the town administrator, collector, and accountant to develop optimum schedule. expecting to complete this process by the end of FY17. That's the Water Commissioner's report. Next committee, I would go with the Land Group. Are they here?
Are you messing with me?
Hmm?
No, the land group is a summary of all the groups.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking,
I thought you were messing with me, Charlie.
I was thinking-
I don't know what the land group is.
Conservation Commission, any updates?
Actually, I'm waiting for Charlie to come. I only have like about a third of it, so if you want.
So we're waiting for Charlie, the chair, to show. Planning Board.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Congratulations to Mr. Labrie. Our loss will be your gain, I'm certain of that. He's a wealth of knowledge, and he's been a very helpful member on our board. He's going to stay with us, I understand, until at least June, and then, but he's been a great asset, which he will be to this board as well. The planning board, it's business as usual. Really, there's nothing earth-shattering going on except a subdivision, but before I get to that, we probably had a half a dozen or 8 A&Rs come before us since the first of the year for lots being subdivided to be created into building lots. Most of our business has been confined to the solar bylaw revision, which we started last December with the help of and the consulting of PBPC, Larry Smith, mainly because most of our business in the last probably 18 months was a lot of solar installations, and because ground mount has to come before us, rooftops are by right. The ground mount is also by right, but they have to come before us so we can make sure that the installations are within the boundaries of the lot lines and they're not impinging on people's property or site views, etc. But we haven't had any issues, and what we did find over the 18 months, though, is that we had to tweak the original bylaw because several issues came into play, whether it was the height of the structures, whether it was whether you could have it in the front of your yard or the back of your yard, and so we decided to revise it, and also we called upon 4 solar companies that had come before us with these installations for various residents to help us craft this and get their ideas about what might be needed to tweak the bylaw. And between PVPC and these professionals and the board, it's been passed last month officially. It's going before a town meeting. And I think we've got a much better handle on it going forward than we did before. And I think the main thing with the solar was some of the bigger units that we're starting to get inquiries now, megawatt facilities that take up 2-3 acres of land or more. So those are the ones where we didn't have the bylaw refined as well as we should. So now we're comfortable going forward with it. That it should be satisfactory. And to piggyback off that, this solar, by virtue of having a solar bylaw in town, it's also going to help with the Green Communities initiative that's coming before a town meeting as well. The stretch code is one part of it, but because we have a solar bylaw in town, that meets one of the major criteria going forward with this, so we're happy about that. Also, before town meeting, Old Harvest Road will be up for road acceptance out there off of Strong Road. That development is pretty much complete. Randall Kemp, the highway superintendent, signed off on it, very pleased with that ready to go. So that'll go before the meeting to be approved or disapproved, but we see no reason why it should be denied. Our greatest agenda item, which is pending now, is a subdivision of 9 units going in off of Crooked Ledge Road. It's known as Quigley Road, where the subdivision is going in. And that is continued until June I'm sorry, the next meeting after this one, I think it's the 18th of May, it was continued because it needed a traffic study. But that's going forward. Again, PVPC is our planning consultants on this project and has been handling that with us. There was quite an active participation from the residents or people in general from town, mainly because of the deterioration of Maple Street and Crooked Ledge leading up to where that subdivision is. And maybe that's a discussion for another day that the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, the Highway Superintendent, whomever might have to get involved in. We're more concerned about the construction vehicles that'll be going up Maple to get to the site back and forth, and how it might add to the deterioration of the road, which is in tough shape now. And from my mind, and I'm not going to speak for the board, but people have to remember too that if the applicant for subdivisions come before us and they meet all the criteria put forth by the subdivision regs, governed by the state of Massachusetts and also our local bylaws, that they meet all the criteria, they really, we really have to have a compelling reason to deny a subdivision just because it might impact a road getting to it. So it's an issue that might have to come before us down the road, because there are several roads like Crooked Ledge in town where there's a lot of land that could be developed, and how we go about that. But to deny a project solely because of a condition of a road might be a slippery slope to get on, because we, the town, I know can't afford legal lawsuits and fighting legal battles, but it is what it is right now, and they're going forward with it. They will make the necessary adjustments via the traffic survey that's coming up for the site distances coming out of Quigley Road on Crooked Ledge to the north and south or east and west, whichever way it faces. But we can't expect an applicant to reconstruct like an eighth, a quarter, or half a mile of an existing town roadway as part of their subdivision, requirement. It just, there's nothing that that will stick with that, really. So they'll do what they can, and we'll see to it that the conditions are such. But that's the biggest issue going forward with us right now. And as Tom Quinlan mentioned before, the entire town of Southampton zoning bylaws are being revised. Pioneer Valley Planning has met with or will meet with all town departments and boards, and I would urge the Board of Selectmen too, that select boards, excuse me, to any issues you have about current zoning that you would like to see addressed, please don't hesitate to contact myself, or and I'll get it to Larry Smith, because there's a lot of gaps in the zoning bylaws when it comes to enforcement. In some areas we have no bylaws whatsoever that address, for instance, noise is brought to our attention, noise bylaw. Chickens was another that's been going on for several years. We won't dig that up right now. Just a lot of things that may have come forward in the last probably 10 years that we need and must take care of, but it's a slow process. What PVPC is doing to save time so there's not a lot of public meetings and wasting of people's time, they'll cull all the information from the boards and departments. He will draft the bylaw with the highlighted areas of all the departments' concerns that they've heard of over the years, and from there it will then come to public hearing, which might take more than maybe two or three public hearings, because there's quite a lot of bylaws there. Where from that and the public's input, we can come to some compromise to fine-tune what's there, and then at least we'll have something that'll put us into the 21st century, because they're pretty outdated and archaic, many of them as they are now. It's going to cost this board, it's in a two-phase project, but the planning board is expecting to pick up the tab for all of it. And I think the first phase is somewhere in the vicinity of $5,000 or $6,000, which we can finance. And the second phase of it might be as much. So we're looking at probably $10,000 to $12,000 to put this package together, but it'll be money well spent that will serve us for decades to come, we hope. And that's about all I have at the moment, unless there's any questions.
I've got a question. On that subdivision, you said it was a 9-home subdivision?
Yes.
Do you think it would come online in fiscal 17, any of those homes, or is that too?
I wouldn't want to be held to that. You know, if they get their permit in June and then there's the appeal period, they couldn't, Jim could probably speak to it more than I when it comes to construction and that type of thing. I don't think there's much that they could probably accomplish between now and the snow flies, huh?
Yeah, I wouldn't suspect they would be.
I'm just looking at,
homes until next year.
Yeah.
so it would go into fiscal 18. I was just thinking if new growth had a bump that we could, you know.
Because the
count on.
road will take that much time just to get the road and the utilities and such put in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your service to Southampton, everyone. Good luck, Jim.
Jump back to conservation.
What's last time?
She pointed at you, Charlie.
Okay. I guess the Conservation Commission has two projects that we could review with you. One, we were successful in getting money from the Community Preservation Committee to spend on stabilizing the Zipta bond. This is just a basic stabilization of the structure. It's not repurposing it for anything other than just keeping it stable. So that's something that we have on the agenda, and we will put I guess we're going to have it warrant at the next town meeting to support that. The other thing is developments, the second project would be developments associated with the DCR grant. As you know, we received $50,000 from the DCR to build a bridge across the Manhan from the Whittemore Conservation Area over to the Pascomic property. And this would connect 35 acres with another 20 acres. It's a pedestrian bridge. It's going to be about 50 feet long. We have been digesting the nature of this project over the last few months, and we have analyzed it in such a way that we're going to have to go through various stages. One is a feasibility stage, identifying the site, the soils, and the flood history at that site. A second is an engineering stage where it really defines the kind of bridge we're going to put in. Then there's a permit stage that is the standard NOIs for the Conservation Commission. And again, this is two towns, so there's an NOI for Easthampton as well as Southampton. And finally, there is the building stage. We have gone out and asked for preliminary cost estimates of this. If you initially, we thought we'd get this bridge built for $40,000. Turns out that these various studies will add considerably to it, and we're now estimating the overall cost to be approximately close to $100,000. It will involve $50,000 from the grant and $25,000 from Easthampton CPC and $25,000 from Southampton CPC. We have spoken to both community preservation committees, and we have their support, but we have to define the cost more rigorously than we can do right now. Those four stages that I mentioned, the feasibility, the engineering, the permitting, and the supervision, that may go in the range of $40,000. The bridge itself, maybe $45,000. And then you have 2 support structures built by ancillary organization, which might be 10 to 15,000. That's where they...
Every time you hit that podium, it reflects really clearly on that microphone, and I just got a text from someone at home that said, "Stop hitting me."
Okay, sorry. I was being corrected by Heather, I'll tell you. Anyway, the bottom line is that at this stage, we understand in greater detail, what it's going to cost. And we have meetings with the various committees in the town, as well as Boscomic. And I think we agreed. And Heather and I and a few other people are going to be visiting Pioneer Valley Planning Commission this Thursday. And we're going to ask them to help us define an official RFP, request for bids, that will conform to state purchasing laws. And they will help us do that. We are a member, as you know, of the Conservation Compact with PVPC, so we get some consultation based on that, but I think we'll probably have some additional charges that I hope the Conservation Commission will support. And but at this stage, we're at a stage where we're going to be officially going after an RFB, request for bids. So those are the 2 projects, the ZIPTA and the bridge project, and timing on the bridge project will probably be late this year, if not early in the spring of next year. Okay?
Any questions, comments?
Okay.
I represent project number 3.
Well, then you'll be up next. Charlie?
Yep.
I want to say thank you for the amount of volunteerism you've been doing in the area of conservation.
It's fun.
I've been watching you for years, taking the abuse, but
Okay.
you're doing a great job.
All right, thank you. No, I was referring to you with that abuse.
One of the things that Charlie didn't mention is that we have a 7-member commission, and most of the time we're lucky that we have 4 people show up. It's embarrassing. Our meeting in April didn't happen with a room full of people who were there to do business with us. So we would ask if we could have more people volunteering whose work and other life schedules doesn't conflict so much with coming. We all know things happen, but when you struggle to have a quorum, it's difficult. We meet the 1st and the 3rd Mondays of every month, unless it's a state or federal holiday. So please, we're looking for volunteers who actually can spend the time.
What time do you meet?
7.
7 at night? Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yep. And that doesn't count the site visits that we do, scheduling around other people's schedule, because we do training, we do site visits. We're running around in the swamps or wetlands. The project I'm representing is another one with Easthampton. So in the case with the Whittemore Bridge, we're working with the CPC in Easthampton, the CPC in Southampton, government officials in both towns, as well as grants either already received or being applied for from the state. Specifically, I'm talking about the Cook and County Road project. You've already heard about it. I gave you, so I'm hoping this shows up on camera, a piece of paper that looks like this that we have in the town hall now. We have a poster in the town hall. We have these flyers in the library, and anyone I can hand them to. It's information so that when it comes to the town meeting time, the people they can make an informed decision. The 5th, during the town moderator's articles session, will be available for questions, and then there's a special session Thursday, May 12th, that we will also have people available. I was at the BAPAC meeting earlier today, which is Barnes Aquifer Protection Advisory Committee, and certainly, since this is about the Barnes Aquifer in part, they were all very supportive, and they'll be going back to their communities to request that the folks from Southampton please vote one way or the other, but particularly we hope for at the annual town meeting. So it's going well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes?
So the two other groups who aren't here tonight just asked me to communicate very briefly. The tree warden has no updates since the last time he presented before the Board of Selectmen. And the ZBA, their current project they are working on is the zoning bylaws in conjunction with the planning board.
So bringing the land group to a close, I'd like to circle back to the selectmen's updates with liaison reports. I don't believe we have any reports.
Well, I have the zoning board and also CPC, and nothing at this time. I talked to Nilda, and there's nothing going on right now.
The reason I'm bringing it up is because I think the board should instruct the town administrator to put it on the agenda for our next meeting so that we can reassign people to the different positions for liaison.
And if you can provide us with a list of the committees and who are on it now, like you normally do?
So you don't want me to create up new committees like the land group and... I could.
That's going on your tombstone.
Oh, man.
Not gonna let that one go.
I can see I've been hearing this for a week now.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, does that sound reasonable, gentlemen?
Yes.
Ma'am? Okay. All right, open time for the public. Mr. Fletcher,
Yes, got some correspondence back from the state.
please give your name and
Bob
address.
Fletcher, 22 Gun Road. The matter at hand is the 8.7 acres that was taken for the tire project in 2001. We have called APR, and they have done the last 2 weeks some research, and they have not only researched their files, but also the legislative files in Boston, and have come up with nothing. The land was never, ever removed from APR. And they do have a letter, which they sent today, if you would like to have a copy of it.
We would love to have a copy of it. I'm only asking as an inexperienced individual, but the town has ownership of the land.
And it is under
But-
APR.
Under APR.
Yep.
Interesting twist. Thank you.
And I believe Heather should have gotten a copy as well. Yes, an email copy.
Well, we will explore this further and see where we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, something else while I'm at it. They just released a new grant program for this very purpose of land that is in trouble, similar to that one. They just released it yesterday. I think it's probably too late for anything this year, but it is a grant program to help with erosion projects, land restoration projects that are under APR that are what they call in trouble. And I may have a copy of that as well.
This is Department of Agriculture?
Yep, Mass Department of Ag. They do not, no, I had a copy of it, what it explained, what the grant was all about, but it was basically to deal with these types of issues where erosion was causing problems on APR land and there was not funding available. And in this case, we have water coming from different areas. Nobody really wants to claim responsibility for it, but it's all doing the same thing.
Would the municipality be eligible for the grant application?
Well, that was part of my reason for hoping that the town would release it and let us take it back to the farm as an APR holder, because then we could apply for it. Whether you want to apply for it, I guess you could. But my feeling is on it that
Mass Highway is responsible for some of that problem out there, and they should step up to the plate. They've had an easement to dump water on our property for over 30 years, almost 40 years now, and I think that they could step up to the plate on this one. For part of the funding anyways, not all of it, but part of it.
Just needs discussion in executive session. If we're talking property transactions.
Maybe we can schedule it for next meeting.
Schedule, Heather?
Executive session number 6.
Yeah. Relative to land. We'll go from there.
Okay.
See if you can email us the web link to the Department of Agriculture's grant program, please.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you. Open time, anyone else? Well, seeing none, I guess we're moving on to continued business. Town administrators, objections and projects. Boy. Heather, you want to give us a quick overview on this?
So this is an item that's been on, I've inherited a pen. Sorry. This is an item that's been on the agenda for a few weeks. We've been working with various consultants for the community compact cabinet grants. The recommendations from some of the consultants was that in their vast experience with working as a town administrator or manager or with them, that they find it generally very helpful if the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator come up with an agreed-upon method as to how to prioritize projects and tasks so that everything gets done in the order in which is most critical. So what you see on the first sheet is the criteria, the priority list. So it lists out the different criteria, the description of it, and the weight. So I have, for instance, if it's a Board of Selectmen request, the description or the question becomes, is the action resulting from a request from the Board of Selectmen? If so, it's weighted at the number 2. Or times 2 rather. Compliance with town plan, does the action fall in line with the town plan? Same weight. Constituent dependent response, is a constituent waiting for a response prior to their action? If it is, it's a 1. A deadline, is there a deadline for this action project that is non-negotiable? If so, it bumps up to a 3. Employee dependent response, is an employee waiting for a response prior to their action? Same thing, it's a 1. Insurance, is this related to an insurance or claim matter? Goes up to a 3. Mandated by law, 3. Monetary factor, will the action result in monetary value for the town, or will the action prevent monetary loss to the town? 3. Property, 2. Reliance, is another department or body awaiting this action before they can move forward? 2. Safety, is there a safety concern or issue? It's a 3. State, federal department involved? It's a 2, and then ramifications, that just breaks it down into different pieces. I'm not actually sure what I meant on that piece. But essentially, oh, yes, I do. That is the heaviest one. So A is something that has to be done, no one else can do it, and has to be done immediately. B is it needs to be done, let's see, it's on page 3 here. B stands for important, something you should do. It's not as important as the A's. The next letter is things that are nice to do, but not as important as the other 2. No negative consequences if it's not completed. The next option, we call it a D, which is for 1, means we can delegate it or assign it to someone else. And the last one is for eliminate whenever possible the object, because it's not of essential importance. So it's weighted like that. The ratings for each of the projects right now is currently set at if the answer to the question is a yes, it gets a 2. If it's a maybe, it gets a 1. If it's a no, 0. This doesn't necessarily have to be what we use. This is just a very brief example. If you look at the second page, it uses the scale system for a couple of different projects, and you have a variety of different numbers. For instance, annual town meeting comes out at a 77 because it's something we have to do. It's something that has strict timelines, monetary ramifications if things aren't done. You have town meeting budget, which is a 68, similar. And then you have other things like the permitting guide, which only really got a 12, because although it's nice to do and it's a good thing to do, it's just not on the highest part of the list. Yes, Charlie?
Heather, I like the concept. I like the direction it's going. But I also have to be fair to Mr. Labrie. He just got on this committee. what I'd like to do is table this for this meeting and bring it into the next meeting so that everyone has a little more time to digest it.
Sure, that sounds good.
Can I add something?
You
Is-
guys can modify this however the board wishes.
This is the third time I've looked at it, and the third time I think it's very complicated. Is there a simpler way to do this?
This is just one example, one sample that we were able to find from looking at different things. It doesn't matter to me necessarily. I just think it's more so the idea of coming up with some kind of joint agreement between the board and the town administrator to figure out when a project comes up from the board, when the project comes up from the town administrator, if it's going to take a lengthy period of time, more than, a few hours to do, then maybe it needs to go through this selection. Outside of that, small tasks that are just easily done, quick phone calls, a few hours, it's not a big project, but everything else becomes a big project.
Yeah. It may be just me. Do you guys find this?
Oh, it's very, I would say it's
cumbersome.
complex.
Yeah.
It's cumbersome.
Yeah.
I totally agree. That's one of the reasons I'm pulling back and saying, let's, the other part to it is do you want to see if you can boil it down a little more?
Oh, yeah, I mean, us or me, yeah, that's
Us,
fine.
we, whatever you
Yeah.
want to do it, but
I mean,
the point is, we saw in the last year, the town administrator was getting pulled in many different directions based on individuals' opinion of what is a priority.
Yep.
We have to stop doing that because we're burning time, staff time, and not getting any direction of anything done. So this was an approach to try to get that so that we go on point with some of this stuff. I don't mind spending another couple of weeks trying to retune this until we get to the point we're comfortable with it, but I think we need to go somewhere with it.
yeah, no, I agree the idea is important, but if we make it too complicated,
It's going to get too cumbersome and it's not going to function.
right,
Yeah.
Right.
okay.
That's reasonable.
So do I hear any motions for anything like this, or,
Do we need one?
well, I don't know, we seem to be pretty cavalier here.
Well, you just tabled it.
Yeah, we just table it to the next meeting. In the meantime, we'll all look at it and try to come up with a simpler system.
But I should second it, his table, right? Shouldn't I? That's a motion.
I'm the chair,
I moved
I'm not
to
making a
table.
motion.
Okay, so,
We don't need a motion,
okay.
correct?
All right, fine, as long as everybody's in agreement, I don't care how any way you want to fold it. No. All right,
Next.
legal counsel, if you will.
So at the last meeting, the board had asked me to draft a request for proposals for town legal services. As I mentioned earlier in my report, I actually sent out on the listserv, and I got a response back from Carlisle. They did a pretty nice job with a very basic, simple proposal. I sent it to everyone. They may not have had an adequate chance to take a look at this today, but this is the draft piece so far. My hope is that the board can look at this, tweak any of the language they feel is necessary, and then we can put it out. We are not required to do a request for a proposal in compliance with procurement laws. However, sometimes it's helpful just to see what else is out there, and there's always there's a provision that's already written into this piece that pretty much says at the end of the day, the select board and town administrator reserve the right to waive any irregularities in the RFP process and to accept or reject any and all proposals. So it gives you complete fluidity in this piece. So if you put this out, you get the worst quotes ever, you get the best ones ever, you decide this is great, there's pros and cons here, but we really like this company better, you guys can just go with that company.
Personally, I'd like to just get this out there. Your motion?
I'm just wondering, as I'm looking at this, are we asking for an hourly rate? Because I'm not, or are we asking them to come up with a billing plan? I mean, personally, an hourly rate, if it's at will.
So at this piece under section 3, you see fees and expenses. The town's budget for legal expenses for FY17 is $25,000.
I saw
This
that.
budget includes fees and expenses for town council and special as necessary. The Select Board strongly desires to stay within the budgeted amount. Towards this end, the Select Board would be pleased to consider alternatives to the traditional hourly rate fee arrangement with council. As but one example, let's see, responding attorneys may propose a fixed retainer for a specified scope of services, i.e. advising land use, permitting boards, regarding applications with an hourly rate for work outside the established scope of services. Responding attorneys should feel free to be creative in this regard so long as the proposal is workable and reasonable. Whether or not the responding attorney proposes an alternative fee arrangement, the attached fees and expenses response sheet should be completed. So when I had seen this in the proposal, John, I had thought of you instantly, because I remember at the last meeting, part of the discussion of the board was to see if there were any alternative ways to do proposals, because we did receive correspondence from a lawyer in the area suggesting that they could do a flat monthly fee. So I think, I thought that the language that was here was actually very helpful. It didn't restrict too much, but it gave folks proposing back the creativity to propose something that might work.
No, you're right. And on whatever page this is, it does say hourly rate, so I missed that one. So, no, I like the idea that they can come back and be creative.
Because the other thing is, too, if they come back with a suggestion or solution that the board never thought of, we can always, we don't have to go with the first RFP. We can always do another one, be more specific to that specific idea if the board's really inclined.
So, you want a motion to send this
I'd like to see
out?
a motion to authorize the town administrator to send out the RFP.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to new business. I guess I'll start this one off. I've heard a number of complaints relative to a volunteer in town doing a lot of extraordinary work trying to help the community. And the question kept coming up, well, this individual is not an employee of the town. So I suggested to the town administrator to look up the provisions of a special town employee to see if that interfaced well with what that individual does. Heather, you want to give us a little update on the MGL, Mass General Law?
I think, do you have the language, the exact language there, Charlie? I think I quoted it.
Special municipal employees, municipal employee who is not a mayor, a member of the Board of Aldermen, a member of City Council, or a selectman in, bear with me, I have enough paper here, town with a population in excess of 10,000 persons, whose position has been expressly classified by the City Council or Board of Aldermen if there is no City Council or Board of Selectmen, as that of a special employee under the terms and provisions of this chapter, provided, however, that a selectman in a town with a population of 10,000 or fewer persons shall be a special municipal employee without being expressly so classified. I hope people are getting all that. All employees who hold equivalent offices, positions, employment, or membership in the same municipal agency shall have the same classifications, provided, however, no municipal employee shall be classified as a special municipal employee unless he occupies a position for which no compensation is provided or which, by its classification of municipal agency involved, or by terms of a contract or condition of employment, permits personal or private employment during normal working hours, or unless, in fact, does not earn compensation as a municipal employee for a graded of more than 800 hours during the preceding 365 days. For this purpose, compensation by the day shall be considered as equivalent to compensation for 7 hours per day. A special municipal employee shall be in such status on days for which he is not compensated, as well on days in which he earns compensation. All employees of any city or town wherein no such classification has been made shall be deemed to be municipal employees and shall be subject to all provisions of this chapter with respect thereto without exceptions. Basically, as I understand this, Art Lawrence is performing a lot of volunteer work in town, in the town hall, in the different offices, and we need to acknowledge that he's a special town employee without compensation and without benefits.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because I may be, does this allow him then to be covered under the town's liability and other insurances in case something happens?
I am not an attorney, but my impression is yes.
Yeah, that's my impression too, and that's why we would do this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we should probably check with council once we decide what to do, just to make sure what we tell him is accurate.
Well, I would like to ask Heather if there's anything else you'd like to add. Then I would like to see a motion to appoint Art Lawrence, special town employee without compensation and benefits, pending review by town council.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Buying recycled paper. Pendulum in this place swings from one extreme to the other, doesn't it?
Sure does.
Heather, you want to give us an update on our recycling paper issues?
Yeah, so this is a policy that was passed back around 1998 by the Board of Selectmen. This was something that they had to pass for the transfer station to be eligible for certain grants, that we would commit to buying recycled paper. I would admittedly say we're not too good at it. The reason being, most of the time, buying recycled paper costs more money than buying regular paper. But last year, the Board of Selectmen did stand by the policy. This year, there's actually the policy, I believe it's in the red folder on your left-hand side, Charlie, in the to sign folder. There's actually just a correspondence sheet on top of it that just says the Board of Selectmen reaffirms this policy that was established in 1998. If all department heads could kindly refer to the policy.
Do I hear a motion to accept this?
Is that going to commit us to buying recycled paper, is that it? In recycled paper, I mean, we're talking maybe 30% post-consumer
So
waste versus...
Charlie has the policy behind the correspondence letter. It's page 2.
Take a quick look. Depending on what we're committing ourselves to. Yeah, purchase products which are environmentally preferred or made of recycled materials are available at reasonable cost and terms.
How much does it say?
Yeah, so basically it's saying we're going to purchase environmentally preferable recycled materials whenever they meet requirements and are available at reasonable prices and terms. So that leaves open for the folks to evaluate. Yeah. Yeah, it says copy everything. It says no less than 20% post-consumer. So that's pretty easy. Standard is 30%. Okay. So I'll make the motion, we adopt this policy for recycled product procurement for the town. Do you want to see that?
Yeah.
Jim seconded?
Not yet.
Somebody want to second it? We have a
I just
discussion?
saw this for the first time.
He's looking over. I'll wait till he's looking over. Right, yeah, I have.
Oh, okay.
Technically, we can't discuss it unless we have a second.
I know.
You can if you want.
So it's really not binding you or anything.
Nope.
We're gonna look into it. That's fine. I have no problem with that.
Do I have a second?
Sure, I'll second it.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Let's sign it and just get it off the table. You want all signatures, Heather?
Just one signature on that letter is fine.
Just the clerks. No, just.
Doesn't say clerk.
Power trip already.
Jim, sign this, please.
No, I'm good.
Oh, man. Oh, yes. And the pendulum just went the other way.
That's kind of recycling.
Adopt the hydrant program. This program was sent out by email in the past few weeks to the Board of Selectmen. Has the board had a chance to review this program? It includes the creation of a website that shows all the fire hydrants in town and allows folks to adopt and name them. To set this program up, it would cost us about $300.
Name them?
Yeah.
So the idea is to keep them clean
Right,
all
I mean,
season, and which,
Take, for instance, I have a farm. I go down and I always dig out all the hydrants during the winter
Yeah.
time that are on that street. No.
yeah,
But I didn't need to adopt them to do that.
yeah. I told Heather I'd adopt the one on my street. My dogs are fond of it.
I guess the real question is where's the $300 come to set something like this up? I don't have the $300 in any account that I'm aware of.
No, I don't either. Not after doing the budgets.
So I know Charlie's suggestion previously was to send this to the water department. I haven't done that yet, but I'm happy to, if the board wants to send this to the water department for their consideration, or even the fire department.
Well, I would look at the water department simply because of the fact that they oversee all the hydrants.
Right, makes perfect sense, and they have a bigger budget, maybe they can.
Well, I mean,
And-
move to just forward it to the water
I
department
mean,
for their review?
that's fine, but legally, we're supposed to keep them clear on our property anyways.
Right.
I mean, it's on your property.
You can't change the look, the face, I mean, you gotta keep them clear. I don't know what the,
Yeah, we're not gonna paint funny pictures
right,
on them.
you can't
Yeah.
change that.
So I'll make a motion, we send this to the water department for consideration.
Second,
Any discussion? All in favor?
I,
aye.
Aye.
Good move, John.
yeah, that's right.
Town warrant articles. Well, the pendulum just swung the other way.
Yeah.
Heather, if you would, please.
All right, so everyone has a copy of the warrant in front of you? All right, so I set this up as usual. I try to set it up in the most logical procedural direction I can. The board is more than welcome to move the articles around whatever way they want. It's the board's warrant. You're also more than welcome to take off any articles except for CPC. I think are the only ones that are restricted from touching because they kind of run their own piece on that one. I don't think there's actually jurisdiction over the CPC articles because it's an independent board for a separate funding source. That's my understanding. I could be entirely wrong, and I'm always happy to look into it.
Questioning you?
You're giving me a look which says you are. So I just want to respond. All these articles at this point have gone through town council. Town council is still reviewing the specific language of the bylaws, but the articles themselves, town council is good with. There are 2 items on here that suggest needing to go to bond. The recommendation from town council was to send those articles to bond council before their final language is ready to go. What we've done in the past when we've had to get a warrant signed and approved was to go through all the articles and just do a motion at the end that was approval subject to approval by outside, bond counsel, legal counsel, whatever we need to do on things. I'm going to probably skip over the budget until the next item on the agenda when we get to those pieces. All right, so the first 2 items are awards. The first one is presentation of educational awards. This is something we do every year so that Randall, the highway superintendent, can present awards that are sponsored by the funding that is collected through recycling cans and bottles at the transfer station. Yes.
Does the board mind if we go through the entire warrant and then just mark what other articles you want to go back to after she completes?
So the ones we don't have a question on, we'll just pass through.
Just going to pass through.
Works for me.
Right, just read them all, and then we'll go back to the.
Right.
Okay, good idea.
I'm just trying to make it more expedient.
Yeah, sounds good.
So that is the first article. We traditionally do it as the first article because we have families and their students who all come to the actual annual town meeting. They pack the floor, and then once they vacate the premises after their awards, everyone else fills in the seats and we progress with the town meeting, usually after a few minutes of recess. The second article I have on here is the presentation of certificates. The town clerk has been doing this for the past couple annual town meetings. Very nice. 1 or 2 certificates are given out for long-term service to the town. What have you. The certificates generally come from the state senate recognition and state house. I'm trying here, I'm trying.
The legislative body.
Thank you, that works perfectly.
Okay.
The second section I have on here, these are two procedural things. I put these on, it's totally up to the board whether they want to keep them on. The reason these two things came about is because I've got a lot of concern from residents, a lot of complaints, and I also know on my own end, I get very frustrated at town meeting with certain things. The first one, it says, to see if the town will vote to allow speakers to face town meeting members while speaking. I know a few years ago the moderator had asked that everyone face directly to the moderator. The problem I feel I've run into is twofold. Number one, the residents often get very upset and complain that they can't see who's speaking. The second thing is, if you're presenting anything of length, like the town budget, larger articles, it is so hard to know what's happening behind you. So I could be going through a 45-minute presentation, trying to hold things over my head and hoping that everyone's following. It would be a much easier thing for communication-wise for the audience as town meeting members, and also for myself as a presenter, to be able to gauge what's happening. Because generally when you're talking to a group of folks, you can tell if they're all looking at you like they have no idea what you're saying, something's going wrong and you can adjust. Or if you're talking so fast that John's giving you a look like, I didn't catch anything you just said, you can slow down. And so I'm hoping that perhaps with this it would get the town meeting members to be in support of the notion of being able to face both the moderator and the town meeting member simultaneously, whether it's off to the side or in an angle, so that everyone can really see what's going on. I understand the idea of trying to keep arguments and comments and aggression down by facing the moderator, but at the same time, I think you're losing a lot by not seeing the town meeting member. So that is why that is there. I'm assuming, Charlie, I'm moving on, and you're going to come back later. Okay.
We're going to come back with the articles that the board wants to review.
The second piece is on here is to see if the town will vote to allow town officials to present the FY17 budget using a PowerPoint presentation on the overhead projector. The reason this one is on here, because generally we haven't been allowed to use PowerPoint and overhead projection during the past couple of town meetings. I find it very important for people to actually see what's happening when you're talking about $16 million budget. They need to see what's happening. They need to have a thorough understanding. You can't always communicate that with a black and white copy that's double-sided on one sheet of paper and hoping that the copy came out right. The other problem you run into is you never know how many copies you need to make at town meeting. Sometimes we make too many. Sometimes we don't make enough because 500 people show up. But doing the PowerPoint overhead projector gives the ability for everyone to see. All the numbers are very clear. Everything is up there for pictures. They can see the charts. They can see it all. So if there's any questions, a lot of that can be cleared up. The other thing is I've communicated with a lot of communities, and we're one of the only ones who does not do their annual budget on PowerPoint as on an overhead projector at the meeting. The next article is administrative. So this one's a little bit different. Some of the communities do this in general, where they actually do live annual town reports from different departments at the town meeting. This is simply just an article this time to see if the town will vote to allow a brief presentation on the status of the Greenway project. There's been lots and lots of questions about what's the status of the Greenway, where are we, what's happening, land grant, no land grant, what's happening. The chair of the Greenway Negotiation Committee actually came to me and said, is there anything we can do to do a presentation at town meeting? This was the best thing I could think of. It's similar in many ways to what we do with the presentations for the educational awards and also the presentation of the certificates. It's just allowing someone to stand up for about 5 minutes. It would be very brief and just give the public an overview of what's happening, where the funding's going, where the status of the project is, and that things are still moving. The next article is road acceptance. We did this last time. This time it's for the Old Harvest Road. The biggest thing to keep in the back of your head is, if you remember last time, town council was concerned about how we go about accepting roads. In the process, we do really need to look at that, and we also have many roads that are potentially that we have never accepted that we may have to go to the legislature to get all of the backdated ones accepted and up to par. The next article is net solar metering contract. So this is what we've talked about in past Board of Selectmen meetings, Todd Bard was here. He did the presentation on the net solar metering credit project up in Deerfield. The Board of Selectmen said, yes, we're for this. We double-checked with Town Council. Town Council said you really need an article. Some towns do one, some towns don't, but they suggested we do one. So the article on here, the language does not feel that clear to me, but this is the language Town Council gave us. See if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a contract or contracts with a term or terms of longer than 3 years for the purchase of solar and/or other alternative energy-based electricity and/or net metering credits associated with such a facility or facilities on such terms and conditions as it deems appropriate, and to take all actions and execute all documents necessary or appropriate in connection therewith. So that's about as much legalese as you can put in 4 sentences, or maybe it's only 1 sentence that's really drawn out. But essentially what we would do is, if the board wants to keep this article on here, when we get to the motions part, we would put a note to explain what we were talking about, that this would allow the Board of Selectmen to enter into the 20-year contract with the project in Deerfield. We can put all the details. And I believe the last time we had the calculations, it was looking to save us approximately $11,000 annually on our energy bills. The next article, repurpose prior voted article. So this was a request of the Water Department. They've changed the language on me a couple times. I actually worked with Vicki yesterday. We had to kind of change it back to prior language because the modified language wasn't in compliance with what we need to do. And Town Council has looked over this and made no additional comment. To see if the town will vote to amend its vote under Article 2 of September 18th, 2012 special town meeting, which authorized the expenditure of $175,000 from the Southampton Water Department Enterprise Fund for the construction of a new replacement Glendale well, to provide that said funds shall instead be expended by the Water Department for the development of alternative sources of water supply. So this article previously was allowed to put funding into a Glendale well or a new Glendale well, modifications or something in relation thereto, and the Board of Water Commissioners wants to expand the use of that funds in articles because they're not sure that's the best project to do anymore, and they'd like to have a little flexibility to do what they believe is in the best interest of the town. The next article is zoning, or the bylaw section. So the first one is for the zoning bylaws to amend the solar bylaw. So this is what Paul Deeman had spoke about earlier from the planning board, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaws for the town of Southampton by amending section 16, solar electric generating facilities. On the major document I sent everyone, I did attach that document. I need to double check one more time with Paul and make sure I have the correct version of that piece, because there were several versions that went around. But I want to double check that that is in fact the correct version. The next piece down is general bylaws. This is to add the stretch code. If you remember, the stretch code is one of the 5 components that we need to take care of in order to become a green community. The stretch code is a general bylaw. When we get to the end here, we can actually just look at the general bylaw itself. We took it directly from the state's version. We did not modify it, other than we spelled out a couple words and made sure the word Southampton might have been in there now and then. But in general, that is verbatim. Okay, next one. So the next 3 pieces, I handed everyone else a copy. The moderator had submitted 3 warrant articles for review and consideration, and of course I left mine at my desk. Give me 1 second. Okay. I apologize that these are not currently written in, but they would have required a little bit more looking up of how to properly include them. So I thought, in essence of time saving, that I would include them separately. Board could review them. If the board wishes for all or any, we can go back and add the language in at a later time. The first article is, the first bylaw rather, pertains to Article 1, which is town meeting of our general bylaws. It's to amend Section 3 to say, "A motion made in town meeting shall be reduced to writing twice, one for the moderator and one for the town clerk, when required by the moderator." The second bylaw amendment or addition here is under Article 1, Town Meeting. It's to add Section 8, which would say, "At the discretion of the moderator, a portion of the hall may be reserved for visitors and open to the public, and a portion of the hall in the rear may be reserved for the working press commercial TV cameras. All town meeting handouts require the permission of the moderator and must be delivered to the town clerk's office by noon on the day before town meeting. All approved handouts must be limited to a table at the check-in area of the meeting." And the last article for a general bylaw addition would be under Article 1, Town Meeting, the addition of Section 9. "No person shall speak more than twice upon any question, except to answer an inquiry or to give information requested, without first obtaining leave of the town meeting, and then not until others who have not spoken upon the question shall have spoken if they desire."
Heather, I'm going to stop you before you get into the budget so that we can roll back a little bit.
Sure.
I'd like to hear from the board if there's any articles that they'd like to review. I myself have a question on Article 4.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, Article 4, I'd like to see it, that you strike PowerPoint presentation, strike on the overhead projector, and add in and/or overhead projector. So it basically reads PowerPoint presentation and/or overhead projector. Because of the fact that the technology will change, and you will have other ways other than just PowerPoint that someone will use to project on the screen.
I'm okay with doing that, but just note that this isn't by any ways meant to be a general bylaw. It's simply just meant to be a one-time presentation piece at the moment.
Point taken.
We know that. I got a question on the same thing. Can we, without too much time or effort, create a WebEx so that people can log onto their computer?
I don't know what, you're beyond me in technology this time.
WebEx, just, you have it hosted here, and people can log onto a computer. We'll give them a password and a time. They can actually see everything right on their own computer for home.
But this is town meeting.
That's okay. As long as it's on the laptop, you can, as long as there's Wi-Fi there, you can project it to a WebEx. We do it all the time.
I understand that, but I don't,
It's a public meeting, and
no, we have skill sets in town that go from one extreme to the other. The projection on a screen in a meeting room, everyone can view. I don't disagree with you that it's great to take and look at a laptop and all the rest of that, but I think we're spinning it off too much.
well, as long as we have the ability as we go along. And by the way, overhead projector, that's old nomenclature, so you want to get rid of that.
See what I mean about technology?
Yeah, just projector is fine, or, projector, yeah.
So,
Okay, he has a question.
I understand that, but I'm not recognizing it. I'm
Okay.
discussing this as a board.
All right, so what I would like to say is that if we're going to go over the budget presentation, isn't that going to be very timely? There's a lot of articles here. Are we going to have time to do that?
Well, my hope is yes. We need to go through the articles, but we have to approve the articles.
No, not the
tonight.
articles. I'm talking about, the budget presentation. I mean, how much detail, how much time are we going to spend on it?
It's the same thing we do every year, Jackie. The only difference is instead of you having to look at a sheet of paper like this, or all the people in the audience looking that close, they can see a big picture up in front of
Yeah.
them. So it's no different. It's the exact
I don't
same
want anybody to
thing.
leave, I just don't want it to be too long and.
It's the same thing. I mean, it goes
Yeah.
as long as people
Just
have
clarify
questions
it.
for.
Clarify it more for us, having it all there.
I actually think it's going to be less time because she doesn't have to refer people to the page. It's, pointer right across, so I think it's going to save time.
Yeah.
I think it will. I really do, because you put the line items up there, you hit it with a laser and say, this is where I'm talking, and you go from there. We've been doing it with this screen here even,
Right, yeah.
you know?
So are we still going to have the printed version as well, or is it going to be,
We are gonna have to have a printed version.
okay, I just know I'm going to pass it out. There's some people in
No,
town, I'm sure, that want to see a printed
Yeah.
Yeah, paper.
We would do a printed version of everything. On the PowerPoint, we've been printing the PowerPoint itself out as well, and we can do that. One of the things I always get very nervous about, Jim, is the fact that I don't know, people don't RSVP to come to the annual town meeting. So the day of or the morning of, when I'm preparing everything, I don't know if it's going to be 50 people or 500 people. So we generally go to the town clerk and say, last time we had this kind of contested issue, what was the turnout? And then we make enough for that population. But one of the benefits of having the overhead, for some reason too, if we run out of the handouts, the overhead's there. And the only thing I'm talking about putting up on the overhead is simply the budget presentation, because you remember it's broken down, general government, public safety, all of those things which are much easier to see in the pictures.
Trying to make it simpler, not more complicated.
Right, that's, I just don't want it to be more complicated, that's all.
I have a question on Article 11, 12, and 13, but does anyone else have any?
Well, a question on 5.
5, let's go back to 5 then.
Well, can we discuss 3 before we go that?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Oh.
Moving on, is it okay? I mean, so, Heather, can you explain again why you want to do, I understand you want people to be up, you know, see what you see, and you want to understand what they're feeling and everything, but I'm not sure if the meeting should be, some people maybe get nervous talking in front of everybody, you know what I mean? Like,
So Jackie, have you ever given a presentation in front of 500 people?
no, I'm not saying a
Generally-
presentation, I'm saying the average citizen's coming up and voicing their opinion, and all of a sudden, they've got to turn around and talk to the rest. They might be nervous and may not want to go up and do that.
Well, I think this article says to allow speakers to face town meeting. I don't think it says they have to speak
Oh,
in face
okay.
town meeting. It says the word allow,
All
which
right.
means that when I'm doing a 2-hour presentation, I can face the people that I'm speaking to, if I so choose.
Well, doesn't it go back to the moderator and his, you know, what he bills, that should be the rules of the,
If this article would allow for the public to decide if they would like to have speakers have the potential of facing them when they speak. And it really is town meeting, and it's the citizens' town meeting and the residents' town meeting. They are the legislative body of the town.
More comments?
I think we should leave it up to the moderator. That's my opinion, but.
You want to do this as a vote?
Well, could we hear from the moderator if you got a minute, or?
Robert Floyd, 15 East Street. Historically, the moderator would be invited to the meeting and weigh in on every single article, per article. The presentation of audio-visual is a good idea, except nobody can see that at home on TV in the select board room. And in the town meeting room, we've had a lot of complaints, which is a major reason we discontinued it, from people sitting in the middle or back. The help me out here if I technically don't go, Paul. The screen doesn't have the resolution to project a clear image. And people are spending the town 15, 16 million. They deserve to have something they can look at. So when you allow any entity, be it the budget, you also allow every other person to project to use a PowerPoint projection on any article. And then it gets really cumbersome, people bringing in their own individual equipment and taking it down. So you cannot limit the freedom to use a PowerPoint presentation to one group, namely, let's say, the select board. Any other group, CPA, the land preservation, George can come up with his own PowerPoint, and it kind of gets out of hand. And the handouts have been working wonderfully. We stopped it because people couldn't see. They couldn't see it clearly. And although we can see the resolution fairly well here, you cannot see it at home. You really can't read the figures.
How about the facing, I mean, we're talking about the facing, the speakers
Yeah.
as well? As we get your comment on that?
In moderator school, they train us that no one is to refer to anybody by name, maybe the previous speaker. Nobody is to denigrate anybody. Nobody is to read a letter from anybody, that's called hearsay, or quote somebody, that's called hearsay. And also not to represent someone. Town meeting under the Commonwealth law does not give anyone that right to do that. The facing the town moderator has been taught to moderators as a way to control for all the reasons, to direct the comment directly to the moderator, not engage in the public. And as was referred to earlier, we had 2 incidents historically from the select board reaching over table, and that's probably what facilitated a few things. But the communication of the legislative body is to address the moderator. Nobody has more privilege in a town meeting. You're the executive branch, and you work hard. Once it comes to a town meeting, a town moderator, whoever that town moderator is, has the power and the responsibility to ensure order and not to have it abused or get out of hand. So in all the schooling, it's to have everyone direct everything to the moderator. The moderator will then call on someone to answer a question. And what happens is, when they're facing the audience, they have this dialogue, and it can heat up and has quite quickly. So it's a way to keep control. It's a way to really, the speaker can't address you people, everyone in the audience. The speaker is to address Mr. Moderator and take the comments and address it to the moderator and not lecture. And that's what can easily happen. When I can see the whole room, I know when to kind of cut someone off or hint everybody's ready to vote, they don't need to talk anymore, everybody's sold on it. So I can get a good reading on the room when somebody's talking, so I wouldn't allow the room to get out of order or to have them, all nod off. I'd, facilitate the delivery by that particular speaker. And it's been working great. We have had more compliments in the last year or two than we ever have. The practices that are in the moderator's suggestion are practices that were initiated in 2005. And my intent is simply to put something more in writing. It passes, it doesn't pass, it doesn't get on the town warrant, it's going to remain as the practice. So we have practices, we have culture, we have procedures, and we have laws, and we have bylaws.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess the question sitting between in front of us now is Article 3. Thoughts, Heather?
I understand, I respect everything the moderator had just stated. I don't think changing or allowing a speaker to face both the town meeting members and the moderator simultaneously changes anything. It doesn't change that you address the moderator. It doesn't change that you ask the moderator for permission on things. It simply just allows the speaker to see, if they're so inclined, that there are humans out there and that there's some interaction going on. I understand it may not make too much of a difference when it's a 2-minute comment, but when you are standing up for 2 hours and presenting a $16 million budget, it is very helpful to actually see the people who are listening to you. That's all I got.
Well, I don't want to turn this into an all-night debate on the first couple articles of the town warrant. So I'm going to ask the committee, do you have a motion to either allow or strike Article 3?
Can I just make a comment? I see both sides, but to be honest with you, after every meeting, I've had numerous people talk to me about, it seems like it's too strict, it's unusual. So I think what she's saying, if the speaker can face both directions, I think that'll take away those issues. I do agree with the moderator that people shouldn't be able to have a conversation going back and forth or anything like that, that he would have to control that. But just facing both the group, the audience, and the moderator, I think would be a good thing, and I would think we should try it out. So I'll make a motion, we allow it to stay.
Article 3.
Article 3.
Okay. Second? For discussion purposes?
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Okay.
The selectmen, if I remember right, are going to be facing the people.
No.
No.
The selectmen,
Moderator changed that a while back.
so the selectmen are facing
The moderator.
the moderator now.
He has said it so everybody faces him.
Everyone's behind you, Jim.
Okay.
We used to have it so we were slanted,
Yes.
but that was changed about a year or so ago.
Interesting.
Maybe it should be, if she's making a presentation, you face the audience. But if it's, okay, let's just say we're going over an article about the chicken bylaw. All right, because that's very controversial, right? So if you have people that are angry and they're looking at the rest of the audience, a situation that could be discussed reasonably may become out of control. I mean, can we divide it where, I don't know, it's such a, but I mean, I do believe that making a presentation, we should face the audience if it has to do with an issue in town, but not something controversial. And I don't know how you could divide it, but I just don't want people to argue and get mad at each other, That's what I'm trying to avoid, some form of order.
Mm-hmm. So my proposal, I guess, back would be to just modify it so it says the town will vote to allow speakers to jointly face town meeting members and moderator while speaking. I would say, I would urge the Board of Selectmen to try this, put this on, see how it goes. If it doesn't work this time, you don't put the article on next time. If it works so wonderful, maybe the moderator wants to modify the practices of the meeting and we'll naturally adopt it and we won't have to put it on as a separate piece. Maybe the people, when you get to town meeting, say this is the worst idea we've ever heard of, we don't want it. But I would imagine there's a decent amount of support out there that said let's try at least seeing a joint human between the moderator and the audience and move on.
And my take on that is I don't think people should be coming up and addressing the crowd. I think it's more important to have whoever comes up to address the moderator, like we were told. But presenting an article or presenting the whole budget may be a different. So I don't know if we could split that, maybe allowing Heather to face when she's presenting the whole thing, and then maybe everybody else faces the moderator. I don't know.
That's a tough road. Yeah.
It's a tough one.
Mr. Floyd, I'm not trying to exclude you. I'm just trying to keep
Yeah,
it.
I'm good. You can't give someone power. You're the executive branch. Once it gets into the legislative branch, your job is done, and you have no extra vote or extra right as anybody sitting in the room. So this is...
Either all or none?
Yeah, when you're here, you can do what you want, but and that's a whole separate branch of the government. Okay. And so you can't give somebody the power. And the concept is right now, nobody speaks more than 5 minutes. And no more than twice. I've added something extra in here, which means that the town can agree to let the person speak a third time. Right now, the practice is not. So if anything, I've increased what the practice is.
Okay.
But the responsibility is the moderator's.
First two, before we get into those other ones.
Okay, yeah.
Okay?
I mean, I'd personally like to compromise, try it and see if it works. If it doesn't, we don't do it again. But there's people on both sides of it, and we both heard it, so why not try it for at least one meeting?
You have an article, you have a motion sitting in front of you. I'd like to call for a vote.
Aye, if that's what you're asking.
An aye is to be clarified to keep it there?
Correct.
No.
No?
Well,
It's your first vote, Jim.
I know, controversial.
Yeah, it's for one meeting.
So we're not, one more question, we're not authorizing it, we're just allowing the people to vote on whether they want that.
That's right. It'll go to town meeting, and they'll,
So the people that show up to the town meeting would vote
the
whether they
decision.
want, the people facing
yep.
what
Jointly.
direction.
Both or forward. Yeah.
And this is not global, this is one town meeting.
Mhm.
I would vote to let the people make the decision. So I would go along with that. Leave this,
So we have 3 in favor, 1 no. Article 4, do I hear an motion on that?
Well, we didn't vote on Articles 1 and 2. I thought we were just going through
I know, but
questions.
because these got pulled out, I figured I'd,
Okay. So I'll make a motion. We allow Article 4 to stay with the couple of changes we made on the wording with the overhead projector.
second. For discussion purposes?
Well, I'm not going to second it all. What, you know, he just came up and said people have a hard time seeing this in the back of the room. And so why would you irritate people more than, you know, they're getting a paper copy of it, and if they can't see it, then why do it?
Well, can I?
It's not fair for the people that are in the back.
Well, I'm gonna disagree that they can't see it, to be honest with you. And secondly, you got people that have paper, and they have the overhead, so they have two versions of what's better. I personally relate to something better up there than sitting there at my bifocals and trying to look at it. So I get an option of, do I want to look at a piece of paper? Do I want to look at an overhead? And that's all that's giving the town meeting folks, and they're going to vote on whether they want to do it or not. Yeah, we're not making the decision. We're just bringing it to the town meeting floor and letting them vote on it.
Can I have a second on this, please?
For discussion?
For discussion.
Just for a second for discussion. You can vote either way after that.
I'll second it again for discussion.
My feeling on this article is that we do not approve it. The reason being, aside from the visual stuff, is I don't want to open this up so that everybody can come down with a PowerPoint and start doing presentations. And that's what I'm being led to believe would occur.
Now, this says town officials on it. So that limits it to only the town officials.
Well, it also says the FY17 budget. If it's no different than if you're doing an award ceremony or presentation of certificates. It's the specific,
To a certain official.
but it's not,
You're giving them more right and authority than anybody's allowed.
Well, only because you and me like to get up to the podium and talk. Because it's the same old argument, Bob, no one hears you.
Robert Floyd, 15 East Street. You can't give anyone more right and responsibility under the Commonwealth laws to officials or to citizens that live on County Road or East Street or High Street. You can't do that. Everybody has the same right. In fact, when the Select Board chooses not to make a motion on an article, which has been done, somebody in the audience can make a motion. So we give by there's a ceremony, or the select board reads the motions, and other towns, other entities, supporters, authors of a article will read the motion. So that's a procedural, but you can't only allow a certain group to behave differently in a town meeting.
Now, is there an actual Mass General law that we can
Yes, there are.
reference?
Yep.
Is that something you could?
Okay. Know the law. Know the law. Read the law. Know the law. Obey the law.
Sounds like a plan.
Sorry for that. Oh, thank. Mass General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 15.
15.
The moderator shall preside and regulate the proceedings, comma, decide all questions of order, comma, and make public declaration of all votes, and can even swear people in.
Okay.
So that's what allows the moderator to have complete 100% control in a town meeting.
So you're
Procedure.
taking from that this is not allowed?
I'm not commenting on that. I'm just saying this is what rules.
No, but
So
you're saying there's a Mass General law that says we can't just say
Yeah,
town
correct.
officials.
Yes, exactly, yes.
So you-
No, it goes on, there's more points. So good question, John. There's more points to it. But everybody, it states everybody has an equal right, an equal vote. Nobody is allowed to even read a letter. That's hearsay. And you can't represent, somebody can't come in and say, my aunt is watching a favorite TV program, but she asked me to speak on her behalf. You can't do that.
Which is another reason why we're not facing.
The idea for everyone to face is to make this more efficient, for the moderator to have more vision on what's going on, to avoid some of the shenanigans that have happened historically, and to oversee and see what's happening, and also to get a reading. I can tell when they're huffing and puffing in the middle of the aisle. I can also tell there's not, I can see. I can see anybody. Before I couldn't. People here, I couldn't see who was raising their hands, or private discussions, or audience members coming up. So imagine if I was sitting there, I still want to extend my power, my responsibility as executive board member into another branch of the government. I mean, it stands to reason. But once you enter the town meeting, even somebody handing out a brochure at the foyer is under the control of the moderator. Everything that's going on in that building. So it's not to be abused. I read the same thing year after year after year. It's pretty transparent. I've worked hard with others to get this to be recorded.
That 2-minute rule?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. The way it's going.
All right.
I just find it fascinating that we're not even talking about the budget.
I understand. Margaret Larson, 9 David Street. So this seems to be very focused on the FY17 budget. And my understanding is that there would also be paper, so it wouldn't just be on the projector. There would also be paper for people who wanted to have paper and that. So my question, I guess, for Robert is, your concern is that if this is allowed, that means it opens it up to other people to then start presenting via PowerPoint. Now, people coming to the meeting wouldn't know that that was an option, correct? Until they got there and this was voted in. So are you concerned that this would somehow disenfranchise people who didn't come prepared with that? I'm just wondering what the concern is when this is specifically about the FY17 budget at this meeting. So I just like clarification. Thank you.
My concern is that for future meetings, it allows people to come prepared. And in fact, most towns have a pro and con presentation PowerPoint. I open it up. Do we have somebody speak for it? Anybody speak against it? But some towns are organized and they come in with a whole PowerPoint presentation, pro and con. And so this opens a can of worms.
Yeah, we got, I'm looking at the clock behind you, Bob, and I'm going, okay. All right, we have a motion in front of us. All in favor?
Of allowing it to go?
Allow it to go.
Aye. I may be the only one.
Okay.
No.
No. Mr. LeBrie?
I don't think we need it. I'm going to say no. I think we can do it with the paper.
And I'm going to say no also. So it's 3-1. It fails. Any other articles up to the point?
Article 5, I had a question. I mean, they said a brief presentation. Is that like a 5-minute or is it like a 30-minute? I didn't know.
It will be 5 minutes or less. There's not a lot we can talk about outside of executive session.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
it's really only meant, Jim, to just, a lot of people have been questioning a lot of concerns. We also feel that, if this piece is presented, they'll touch on the land grant and what, kind of the parameters, what happened, so that people don't get really upset when they get to the Cook County Road article at the end, and it's talking about a land grant, but they heard that we lost land grant because of the Greenway. Does that mean we're precluded from getting another one? Does that mean...
The only reason I brought that up, if it was going to be a time-consuming thing, I would say maybe an information center session prior to the town meeting. But if it's only 5 minutes, I don't see that being an issue.
I'm happy to even write in the word 5 minutes. I don't think Mike or I would be upset about limiting it to 5 minutes.
I'd hate to put 5 minutes and go 7 minutes and have somebody say...
I think it's fine. If that's the scope of it, that's fine.
I don't know if anyone else has any other concerns with articles. I have concerns with Article 11, 12, and 13. I believe those articles should go to our bylaw committee for review prior to them ending up at town meeting, because they're actual bylaws.
Yeah.
I don't think we should just dump them in there for that.
I would just say to clarify, because there is a stretch code bylaw as well, and although that might be the instinct to do the same, the stretch code bylaw, I think, can be delineated because, number one, it is literally verbatim from the state in their language, and number two, it's holding us up from getting the green community designation that we have to get under wraps in order to apply for grant funding for October.
That was vetted at many different levels before it got to this town meeting. It didn't just show up at the last hour. So, I'd entertain a motion to strike Article 11, 12, and 13 and refer the applicant to the bylaw committee.
Second.
You have to make the motion.
Oh, so moved, sorry.
We're going to be doing
I'll second it.
No, I'm tired now.
I second.
discussions.
Semi-related discussion, Article 9 and 10 are both the general bylaw changes too, so, or zoning bylaws, so we can only do 3 of them and not the other 2?
Well, zoning bylaws isn't the same thing, John. Zoning bylaw already had a public hearing, already got vetted
So we're
through the
good?
planning board. When you get to the zoning bylaw, one of the difference between zoning bylaws and general bylaws is the day after town meeting, zoning bylaw is now in effect.
Okay.
General bylaw, even if approved at town meeting, does not become in effect until the Attorney General's office approves.
Okay, good, thanks. I didn't want something to come back and bite us.
Oh, that's guaranteed.
Which ones are we,
We're striking Article 11, 12, and 13.
11, 12, and 13, okay.
And simply because they just came in at the final hour, they haven't had any vetting, any review. We have a bylaw committee to do this. They haven't even seen it. And if we're going to put this in front of the town floor, much rather it was vetted first.
That's fine.
The other 2 were at many different levels.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor of striking these 3 articles?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes got it, unanimous. All right, let's go back from the other articles that we passed over. Are we approving those articles? That'll take care of that section.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we approve all the articles that we didn't approve individually we approve all the articles as a group that we didn't approve individually up through Article 13.
So,
Up through 13, excluding 4,
Well, again, if we,
11, 12, and 13. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just being clear.
Yep.
That's fine.
All those in favor?
I,
aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, moving on to the 17 budget.
So I'm only going to touch on the articles that aren't part of the omnibus budget, because we'll go to that in a few minutes. So the first one is a transfer for the amortization of the WPAP bonds. This is an annual piece that we do. It's in the amount of $20,401. The second annual piece that we generally do, although not as required, is the transfer for ambulance-related expenses. This we talked about last week. This is part of the money that comes in the revenue side. The ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation is essentially known as the ambulance fees. These are the amounts of money that we collect each year when the ambulance is actually put out into service, and we bill folks that we pick up and we transport to the hospital, provide services for. Each year, we are able to spend up to the amount of ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation. That caps out on the other side of the budget and the expenses, which adds up all your ambulance-related expenses. So your ambulance wages, your ambulance standby, equipment, software, all of those pieces. Anything ambulance-related on the expense side, the amount of money going in the revenue side can equal but cannot exceed. Today's date, we were up to, I think it was like $197,000 in the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation. At the budget meeting last week, the board decided to go with putting $158,000 in to the revenue side to keep things moving and smoothly. That does reserve, as we talked about last week, $10,000 still in there in case we have to do transports. And also it allows $25,000 for a later article to put into the ambulance stabilization fund for the purposes of purchasing a new ambulance. Everyone good on that? Okay.
You mentioned, you said transports, or are you talking about intercepts?
Intercepts, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for correcting me, Jim, on that one. Keep you around. Okay. Next one, 16, appropriate for transfer station enterprise fund. This piece still needs to be approved by the Board of Health. This is the most recent balanced budget that was submitted by Randall, but this is what's going to end up on town meeting. If the Board of Health wants to amend it, they unfortunately will have to do it on the floor. I don't think, Robert, that there'd be an issue with amending the numbers within, right? The totals.
As long as they go down.
But as long as the total at these two numbers doesn't exceed 207,000, they could shift the numbers within those two pieces, and that would be okay?
It's not a line item in the budget, I would say yes,
Okay, so you'd be fine with that?
for this particular.
Within these two, yes. So in other words, the Board of Health meets and they say, you know what, we see it's 207, but we want to change the wages to 30,000 and reduce the operating expenses to 137, they would be able to do that. At this point, this presentation of the transfer station, it reduces the transfer station hours from 3 days operating to 2 days. Reason being, even with the most optimistic approach of how much funds are going to be coming in for the revenues, we just couldn't make it. Our expenses were still exceeding the revenue side. So the one piece for wiggle room was wages. Randall has spoken with the transfer station attendant, so he's aware, and I think he saw this one coming with less service and less folks coming into the transfer station during the weekday hours. So I believe Randall's newest proposal is to have transfer open on Thursday and Saturday, I want to say. It's definitely Saturday. It's either Thursday or Wednesday. Don't quote me. Okay, next one is the appropriation for the water enterprise.
Because you're saying this article has to have approval by the Board of Health as well as the Board of Selectmen, I'd like to see a motion by the Board of Selectmen to accept this contingent on the Board of Health's approval, so it's a separate vote.
But you're not going to get the Board of Health's approval till May 9th.
I understand that. But this way here, the article's approved so we can put it on the warrant,
Okay,
but we still acknowledge the fact that they need to vote on it.
okay.
Am I making sense to you?
Yeah, no. I understand that the Board of Health needs to approve it, and I don't disagree, but I don't think this is one of those articles that, for instance, you know, it's not like tomorrow we're going to get modified numbers and we're going to write them in. This is the number that's going to end up on the warrant, so the only way for them to modify it would be
Okay.
on the floor.
Point taken. Carry
I'm
on.
happy to send them an
Carry
email
on.
and say, the board understands that this is the Board of Health's, you know, overall approval piece. If there's any modifications, please let us know, and we'll happily help you coordinate the decreases in these numbers at town meeting. The Water Enterprise Fund you see there as well. The next article is the Omnibus Budget 18, which we said we were going to skip over. 19 is the revolving funds. So what these are is funds that are allowed under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half, to be able to create. We've created these all at past meetings at various times. It gives you the revolving fund title, who's authorized to spend out of it, the revenue source, where the money's coming from, what they can spend the money on, and ultimately, at the end of the day, the cap, the amount of money that they can ultimately collect and ultimately spend. So whatever money comes in this account goes out of this account. So you have the Council on Aging van, which is, we increased to $30,000 because they believe they were going to increase the revenues coming in and costs going out. Dog licensing and control is still at $8,000. Electrical inspections is at $15,000. Park Commission, this one is for the collection of field usage fees, and the use of the fund is for operating expenses and admin expenses, that's at $10,000. Planning Board, there's two accounts. The first one is for filing fees, and they spend out of that administrative cost, and that's $10,000. The second one is for consultant charges, and they spend out of their consulting costs, and that's $15,000. Then you have plumbing inspections, which you pull in the plumbing inspection receipts and you spend the payment for the plumbing inspection services. That's $15,000. Tax title, for the treasurer collector, receipts from tax title related costs, $10,000. Weights and measures, pull in receipts from the fees, spend on weights and measures fees, $3,000. And then zoning board of appeals, receipts from fees, ZBA expenditures.
Board of Health had no interest in,
I've tried numerous times. I have not got any flavor of it. Unfortunately, I have not been able to speak independently to the board. I've only communicated with the health director, who told me they were not interested in that. The board was not interested.
okay.
Article 20, we start to get into stabilization accounts. So the first one is actually for prior year bill. The prior year bill goes back to FY15, so it's a few years behind us. It's for the sum of $397.30 to pay Greenwood Industries for roof work on the Norris Elementary School. So it was the school bill that had just recently come to Vicky's attention that was never paid, that we need to catch up on.
It says here 2/3 vote, doesn't it take?
So this case, it is a prior year's vote, but because it's a prior year's vote at annual town meeting, it's a 4/5 vote. If this was special town meeting, it would be a 9/10 vote. So the attorney informs me.
Okay, it says 2/3.
It says 4/5, right? It should say 4/5 under Article 20 on the right-hand side, right above the word Greenwood invoice.
See it? No, it's right here. Yeah.
You must have an old version, I can't help you.
That's what it says on his. You need a new one.
I don't know what version you have there, Charlie.
I don't
All
know.
right.
Yeah.
So the next thing is so now we're in the FY17 stabilization account budget piece. First one is to transfer to the ambulance stabilization account. This is $25,000 from ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation. This is what we talked about earlier. It requires a 2/3 vote. The next one is transfer from operating stabilization for ballistic vests. This is the request of the police chief. This is one of these articles that needs to be contingent upon approval of bond council. I don't think we're actually going to need to go to bond, but we need that as an option. So what this is essentially an article that totals $10,902 for purchase of 13 ballistic vests. There is a grant out there that we will be applying for that's called the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant from the U.S. Department of Justice. This partnership grant is a matching grant. Ultimately, we have to pay the whole thing, and they reimburse us 50%. So maybe matching / reimbursement, I guess it depends on which piece comes first. But essentially, we have to cover the initial cost we spend, then they reimburse us their 50%. That being the case, we took the language from other articles we've used in the past, so it reads the following: to see if the town will vote to transfer the sum of $10,902 from operating stabilization for 13 ballistic vests for the police department, and actually that first number, I believe, should be reduced. And the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow the sum of up to $5,451 in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 7 of the General Laws as amended, or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes therefore, provided, however, that such funds shall not be transferred, borrowed, and or expended unless the town is approved for the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant from the U.S. Department of Justice and or any other source in the amount of $5,451 or more. So what this is saying, I need to go back and I will take a look at that number with Vicki and Donna. But essentially, we don't want to give someone $11,000 and say, yeah, we believe you'll apply for the grant and we think you'll get it, and then they don't get it and they spend all of the money. We also don't want to be in the situation where, you know, we give the money and now we have to wait and get reimbursed the other half later on to put back in the account. It makes more sense just to give them exactly what they need, contingent upon the approval and the acceptance of the grant. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Next one is a capital improvement committee piece. The number actually should be modified there to read, what is it, Margaret? 53? 196. So this is a project coming from Capital Stabilization. Capital Improvement Committee approved the article. It's in the amount of $53,196 for the purchase of a police cruiser with camera and laptop. Question, John? You're giving me a look.
Well, just look, because I've been involved with buying a lot of police cruisers where I am. That just seems like a high dollar amount. Do we have a quote from MHQ or somebody with that?
So what ended up happening is, so we generally buy our cruisers at the basic amount, so it's like $30-something thousand. Right. But the problem is that it's basic, like it has nothing in it. It has no cameras, no software, none of the systems, no paint, no, any of the it's just a plain car.
A police cruiser.
Plain police cruiser, like stripped to the basics.
Well, they're not stripped, but go ahead.
But that's all you're getting for the $33,000. The additional costs, this year we spent less than this. I think it was $44,000.
Right.
But one of the conversations I believe the Capitol, or I know at least Charlie had with the police chief, was that his concern was that you can't always count on people who have other jobs. So some of the police officers would volunteer their time and come and, they would put the decaling on the side of the unit. Yep. They would install all the software or the cameras. For some reason, if they can't, you're still going to incur those costs.
Yeah. I guess I would just like to change it up to the amount of, because if we spent $35 for the vehicle and then we got to spend another $10, $15, we don't want to take that money and just give it. It should just be for the actual cost of the vehicle. And if it happens to be $53,196, fine, but...
So you mean the cost with the camera and laptop?
Yeah, up to, yeah.
The next item is transfer from capital stabilization for turnout gear. This is another capital improvement committee article. This is in the amount of $9,000.
This is a 3-year plan. Every year we give the fire department $9,000 to start upgrading their equipment. We did it last year, we'll do it this year, we should do it next year.
Can I ask a question? It relates back to 22. Why are ballistic vests from operating and
So easy.
from
Very good question. The police chief actually, I believe, went to the capital improvement committee on the ballistic vests. So one of the questions when you get some in capital is the lifespan of them and the reusable nature of them. In this case, the items, maybe over $5,000, which is one of the criteria. However, the lifespan isn't very long on these vests, and they can't be reused. It's not like we have a bunch of helmets in the back and all of us can take them. They're custom made to the wearer.
Understood, but how long do they last? They've got to last.
It's only a few years. I want to say about 3, if I recall correctly.
I don't remember what.
What's the criteria for capital, isn't it?
It has to be a lifespan of 5 years or more.
So it's 5 years?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Article 25, transfer from capital stabilization for elementary laptops, to see if the town will vote to transfer $22,000 to the elementary school to fund the purchase of 11 teacher laptops. This is another capital improvement committee article. All good? Okay. The next one is transfer from capital stabilization for elementary projectors. See, we will have nice projectors eventually there to project the budget.
Notice the word overhead is missing, right?
Hey, hey, hey.
Damn. Another typo.
So it's for the purchase, it's $6,400 to the elementary school to fund the purchase of 4 classroom projectors. And the last item on here is to transfer from capital stabilization for an I just wrote for elementary door. It's to see if the town will vote to transfer $9,925 to the elementary school to fund the purchase of security door retrofits. This is also a capital improvement committee. I'm sure come town meeting, if there's any questions, someone from capital, the school would be happy to stand up and explain how if a teacher walks too close to a door, the door opens.
Or doesn't.
Or doesn't. Guess it depends.
Yeah.
Do you want to stop at those sections, Charlie, or shall I?
Yeah, you want to, any articles you want to review?
Can you talk about the security door? Sure. Please.
Margaret Larson, 9 Davis Street. I'm also the clerk of the Capital Improvement Committee. So the issue with the security door is every teacher is assigned a badge that allows them into the school. So if I'm a teacher and I walk up to that door, it will click open and allow me in. However, there is an issue with it that if a teacher is standing near the door, simply wearing their badge, that door will click open for about a 30-second to 1-minute period before it shuts again. And so this is seen as a security risk that someone could come in. So this was the quote that they got to retrofit these doors so that that would no longer happen. There's a sensitivity issue, possibly with the monitors, possibly with the door itself.
But it won't impede somebody coming up to the door wanting to get in?
So the idea is that you would have to present your ID badge directly to the sensor, as opposed to me standing over here and the sensor is somehow reading it and then opening the door.
So it's a proximity reader, it's just a proximity is farther out?
Too sensitive.
Yes, and it's something that's happening inside but not outside. So I could be outside lollygagging around with my ID and that doesn't happen, but inside it happens.
Isn't that a software adjustment, or?
They're not sure if it's the monitor or if it's something having to do with the door themselves, but this also includes some of the examination of the situation to solve the problem.
Pardon?
I was just going to say, on Article 25, the laptops, why is it important for the teachers to have them, and what are they using them for?
So their laptops are getting a little on the ancient side, and so the teachers prepare their curriculum on the laptops. They also are used in conjunction with the projectors to project lesson plans, and they are getting to the point where they are so slow teachers are having a difficult time using them properly. They will not go to waste. They're not being put into a landfill. They will then transfer to student use on either their cows or their calves, their little mobile computer units, which the school also sees as a necessity. If we transition completely to the park testing, then some of that testing is proposed to be on computers. And so students will need more laptops available to them. They do, in fact, want to eventually replace all the teacher laptops over the course of about 4 years. So this may very well come up again, whether or not we have the funds. We don't know. So we did not commit to that like we did to the turnout gear, for example. We said this year we can fund this many.
Are they PC-based or Apple-based, or?
I believe they're Apple.
Apple, okay.
And they did come to us with a number of other requests, but Kim Florick was able to do a fantastic job with getting some grants for wireless access and some other things to the tune of, I don't know, $7,500,000 in total.
Capital Committee only had X amount of money to spend on
Right.
certain things, and we
Right.
score things based on priority of the town.
Okay.
Right, and some things we said no to, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question which reminds, not for you, sorry.
Not me?
Yeah. We were just talking about that particular article. It could be a monitor, could be a motion deck, could be software. A lot of these articles, all the articles here, last four or so, say specific amounts. Can we change them all to up to? So depending on what the issue is, if you need $4,000 to change it, you get $4,000, but if you need $925, you get it. Because
Well, you could change it on the town meeting floor with the motion.
we could change it here now.
Well, what I'm saying is if you put the article to say up to,
Right.
fine, it stays up to. And
Right.
in a town meeting, you're going to make a motion, and you're going to have a specific dollar, but it won't go beyond.
Right, so we should always have up to in there, and we've had that in the past, too.
But so, two things. So the amount that's written here, the moderator does a good job at not allowing anything to go higher than the number of town meetings. So if it's written in for 42K and you go and you say, well, I'd like to amend it to 43, the answer is no. However, if you're talking about when they're expending something, they can only spend up to that number. They can't spend 43 because there's only $42,000
Right.
in that line.
If there's 42,000 in that line, they spend 35, what happens?
The rest of it, the rest of it rolls back into the source.
So
where
it's
it
an
came
automatic
from.
rollback?
So what ends up happening is Vicki checks in with people, I think we started this last year, she checks in with people more regularly on their capital projects. Margaret, how's that capital project going? You know, it looks like you still have a balance of $2,000. Are you all done? Yes, I'm all done. Okay, she then takes that $2,000, no town meeting necessary, and rolls it back into capital.
So I can't get $10,000 for a project, cost me $6, didn't take the other $4 and spend it?
No, it has to be that project related.
That's the only issue then.
If you want an example of the Gun Road cleanup, when that went to receivership, the town had voted $7,000 to spend on cleanup. We never spent a nickel. That $7,000 went right back.
That was my only issue. Thanks.
I'm sorry, I was in the other room.
Well,
Was
the
there a
question
motion?
Do you want to make a motion to accept all the articles that we've read so far? What I was thinking of doing is have a motion to accept that and then have a 5-minute recess.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Jackie agrees with it. That's
So I'll make a motion, we accept the other articles that haven't been previously accepted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion for 5-minute recess? Do you want pizza again?
I can eat pizza every day.
You got to tell me this in advance. All right, Paul, we're going to have a 5-minute recess.
God.